Hey everybody, Jeff Tidwell here with another one of my tweet videos for you today. It is October the 19th of 2019 and we have some more tweets to go over, break down, analyze, and so on and so forth. You know what you're in for if you've watched the channel before. If you're not watching this on BitChute, you're watching it on YouTube. And of course, I can be found on Twitter at Real Jeff Tidwell. I'm also on Minds, Gab, Telegram, Parler, Instagram, and of course, if you enjoy this content, please do hit the like and subscribe buttons. If you really enjoy this content, check out the notification button by checking out the little bell below. That way you'll get updates whenever a new video drops, or the smaller segments that are derived from these larger, longer, long-form tweet videos. And of course, as I always say, if you find my cadence to be a little bit on the slow side, you can hit the 2x speed button and get all of the information in half of the time. Time is the currency, of course, and that is double bang for your buck. It's a good deal, so check it out below. And without further ado, we are going to dive into some tweets from March 2019, going back in time, per usual. And we're going to start here with a few named tweets. Usually these are slightly higher concept and cover a couple of different areas of interest, a few different subjects. But in this case, once again, we're returning to some tweets that have multiple versions. And the first version of today's first tweet is called "When the World is Running Down." That's a reference to The Police, the song "When the World is Running Down, You Make the Best of What's Still Around." I love The Police, I love Sting. In fact, my first concert was Sting, so I figured it'd be nice, we're talking about artists here, to reference one of my musical heroes. Okay, so I'll start with "When the World is Running Down." Many artists craft their best work by feeding off of pain. Media giants projecting a reality of dread affect both consumers and entertainers, generating fear in the public as they simultaneously market people empathetic to the struggle. Cha-ching! And so there's a second version of this tweet that's attached, and that's called "Cultural Capitalism." And it goes like this. Very similar. Many artists craft their best works by drawing from pain. Media giants projecting a reality of dread affect both consumers and entertainers, generating fear and anger in the public as they continue marketing protesters empathetic to the struggle. Cha-ching! Cha-ching! So, of course, these artists, and I consider myself an artist. I do have a background in broadcast journalism, I've done some acting, some writing. I make these tweet videos, and there's a whole lot of little areas. If you check out my Instagram page, I do some digital art and some photography as well. I've dabbled a little bit in a number of artistic fields, and so I understand as well as anybody that a lot of art is derived from pain, from struggle, from depression even. So many artists craft their best work by feeding off of pain. So there needs to be some friction. If, some artists do derive a lot of art from their positive energy, but a lot of artists really need that negative energy to drive them, to make them find that breakthrough. There's a great quote, actually. Well, it's a scene from one of my favorite shows on HBO, The Larry Sanders Show, talking about how one of the writers for Larry Sanders on the show, it's a late night talk show, and his girlfriend broke up with him, so his jokes got better. Like the drive, the interest in doing the art increased because he had anger, he had emotions, and he needed an outlet. He needed a place to make his comedy more snappy. There needed to be some tension, some friction there. And that helped him to find, that drove him to do that. So in this case, we're talking about the industry, though. We're talking about the industry of art, the commercial aspect of it, and how, media narratives are out there. Artists take in media, they comment on media, and depending on how true or false some of these things may be. In the case of the modern religion that is global warming, I happen to be agnostic on that modern religion, but you'll see people making albums about how the climate doom that's happening, the Extinction Rebellion needs our help. We have to rebel against the oncoming onslaught of climate doom, as it were. And that really drives that sort of negative energy, that depressing feeling drives a number of artists to make some of their better work, because they have a force to push against. There's something for us to unify against. And they're able to put that into their work. And the media can craft it. It can be something that's more, rational, something that's more observable, you can actually have empirical evidence of, or it can be something that's more about the zeitgeist and how people are feeling, where the persuasion is heading, which way people are going. But ultimately, these media giants, artists can derive a lot of beauty from pain. Some of the greatest albums of all time are breakup albums. There's so many beautiful things in this world that are derived from depression and anger and these negative emotions that really help in this sort of, it seems counterintuitive, but it's like every action has an equal and opposite reaction. They actually bring some of the best out of us. Some of our darkest moments bring some of the best out of us. And it's always darkest before the dawn. So there's a lot of good that negative energy can bring, and that is especially true for artists. But of course, when media giants, your ABC, NBC, Fox, all these massive mega corporations, when they project a reality of dread, it affects both consumers and entertainers. So they're both the consumer and the entertainer are looking at the same picture, and they have the same worries. So it's easier for the entertainer, in this case, the artist, the musician, the filmmaker, to capitalize on that feeling, to pace their audience, to capitalize on that feeling that of dread, or that issue that's troubling them. They have the same concerns. Again, may it be rational or irrational, they have the same concerns, and they're able to make art that a person can listen to and go, oh. Now, of course, politics, for example, is a timely subject. So, of course, sometimes it's better, getting a political record correct, making an album that stands the test of time and doesn't feel like it's just in the moment too much is hard. Making political music is hard. There's few people that have actually pulled it off with success. Maybe the Roger Waters, a few others, many others, of course. But I think more often than not, political music kind of ages differently than the timeless work that's associated with more broad emotions that aren't, the current cultural or political concern. So if media giants project a reality of dread, the art reflects that. The art reflects what the entertainer is observing in the environment. And so the consumer is getting something that they recognize. They recognize what's going on. They're already in that sort of macro simulation. They already understand the issues at hand. It's like it's being marketed right to them. is being marketed right to them, no matter where they are in the political spectrum or the political sphere, as I call it. But yes, they generate fear in the public, these media giants, and then they simultaneously market these entertainers that are empathetic to the struggle. It's the struggle. Just as I said with the idea that artists derive some of their greatest work from struggle. When they're feeling down, art provides a way forward for them, for their I mean, this is, of course, speaking generally, and it's different for different artists. Again, different people derive energy from positive places and negative places. Some people are essentially happy all the time, and that's how they get their artistic inspiration. And others are a little on the darker side. I am sure Robert Smith would agree with me on that. But again, it is a business. It is a cha-ching when these things line up. So many artists craft their best works by drawing from pain. It's true. It's true. When everything's going well, there's no tension, there's no friction, there's no purpose. There's nothing getting in your way. You know, and some people derive some incredible art from those things. It's true. Like I said, you can derive it from anywhere. And we're all different. But when media giants project a reality of dread affecting both consumers and entertainers, that fear and anger, you know, being able to sort of set it up, you know, you create it, and then you create a product that meets it and kind of provides that catharsis for that fear and dread. Again, it could be real fear and dread, or it could be just, you know, propaganda designed to persuade in a particular direction. But in any event, there is money to be made. Follow the money. And, you know, generating fear, anger, the public, and these protesters, they're protesting. I mean, art really, I mean, let's go back and think about all the artists. Like, artists are traditionally known as the, you know, the hippie generation, the artistic world. Not the people in suits, not the yuppies. Those are the consumers. Those aren't the people that generate the art. They're the ones that consume it. But you'll find that there is a kind of a correlation. They always call it like liberal Hollywood, or, you know, the liberal media, or artists are, you know, an artist. I've talked about artists in past videos. There is my video, Looking Glass, Artists and Politics. Definitely check that out for a little more in-depth look at this topic of artists and how the artistic mindset can affect a political viewpoint, or how somebody processes incoming information. But yeah, artists are normally associated more with the bohemian, sort of the idealistic. It's a world where if you can't have a small box. Art requires thinking outside the box. It requires thinking irrationally and thinking in ways, you know, impressionistic ways, and just thinking completely separate from the concrete world. It's a world of abstractions. It's a world of, you know, presenting a new window. I talk about artists in the window, presenting a window, their window, into reality that you can also connect with that artist through. You listen to an album, you watch a movie, you read a book, you watch a YouTube video, and you feel a connection to the artist. And if the artist is talking about something that's on your mind, that's something that you can relate to, may it be something romantic, or if it's something more cultural or political, there is this connection between what the media presents, and then the same company, maybe it's Viacom or Disney, they might present a narrative, and then they have entertainers that provide catharsis for that narrative. And that's kind of the situation I'm talking about here with these two tweets. There is money to be made. Cha-ching. So, onward and upward. Okay, so last tweet video I did was 2 weeks ago. I went away with my friends to Maine. We had fun, we had debauchery, we did a lot of good stuff, but I didn't make a video, and now I'm back making a video. But my last video, I did touch this subject, and I'll continue working on this subject today. This is another named tweet. It's called Waging War, and it's on the subject. The wage in question is regarding the female wage gap. So let's touch on waging war. Less masculine people tend to be more agreeable, posing a challenge when they're working to persuade. The strain is evident when they step out of their comfort zone into alpha-like aggression. A focus on people over things can lead to more ad hominem and less substance. So this is a little bit broad, but we'll break it down for you. Less masculine people tend to be more agreeable. So, when you're comparing masculine traits to feminine traits, again, we don't want to speak, just as a disclaimer, for those watching the video, I do not wish to be in any way sexist towards men or towards women. We're not looking to do that here, and we're not looking to judge people by their group or look at group averages and say, well, this is how things are. Everybody is an individual. They have their own merits and flaws and behaviors, lifestyle, and so forth. So this isn't a way of putting people into a box and holding them there. We do not look, on this channel, we do not look at people by their immutable characteristics. And also, it's important to say that men and women obviously both have, and each person is on a spectrum of masculinity and femininity. Masculinity and femininity, I should say. So this, we're talking about less masculine people. We're not necessarily talking about women per se, but women are on average less masculine, so this does apply. So less masculine people tend to be more agreeable. And being more agreeable is not great when you're trying to negotiate. When you're trying to, for example, get a raise or get a job. Being agreeable has its applications. There's certain places where you do want to, pace your audience. If you are looking to persuade, you do want to agree and get on the same page. But in general, being agreeable makes you seem less like a leader, less like somebody that's independent, and somebody that's more, I guess you could say, easy to walk all over. Or, they don't seek somebody that's more agreeable in general, again, generally speaking. They're not looking for any tension. They're not looking for friction. They're looking to just get by. And that can make it harder to negotiate for a better job. Now, again, it's different strokes for different folks. Different employers have different preferences, so on and so forth. This isn't any sort of objective or definitive take on this situation. But generally speaking, femininity, I can't say that word today, folks, is more agreeable. So it is a challenge when they're working to persuade. And it's really hard for somebody that's more subdued and submissive to dial it up, to dial their ego up. That's why I say, you are not your ego. I do have a video on that. Check it out on my channel, on my YouTube channel. You can see that video. And I talk about how you can bring your ego up and down, use it as a tool, and try to separate it a little bit from your identity, because that'll help you a little bit more in the real world when you're looking to negotiate, persuade, and to generally have a better time of things. Being able to separate your ego, accept when you're wrong, like I say in every video, a lot of the things I say here are, either objectively or subjectively wrong. We're always learning, we're always continuing, and it's good to be aware of that. But it's hard for somebody that is relatively feminine to act masculine. They have a viewpoint that, they have an image in their head of what alpha-like behavior is, what somebody is what you know, it's hard to it's easy to observe somebody, but it's harder to get the mindset. That's why people, you know, they have, you see it all over the place. There's a lot of positive thinking videos. There's people that talk about how on Twitter there's influencers that are like, oh, you know, stop doing this, eat more vitamins, do more exercise, get your self-esteem up. And these are wonderful things. Positive thinking, positive affirmations. But it is pretty evident when somebody tries to, you know, when somebody that has submissive behavior tries to dial it up. If you haven't practiced, you could strain a muscle. You could definitely strain a muscle. And of course, a focus on people over things can lead to more ad hominem and less substance. So this kind of goes into what Jordan Peterson and others have said about people that, you know, women, for example, are more likely to go into fields that involve things like psychology, people, social fields. And more masculine individuals, men, are likely to focus more on things. So when I say, you know, feminine, a focus on people over things can lead to more ad hominem, I'm talking a little bit about dialogue and debate. Less substance, more emotion. You know, being a little bit more emotional could be seen as a feminine attribute. Again, if you disagree with any of the things I'm saying on this topic, please do leave me a comment below with your thoughts and observations, criticisms, and accolades alike. So yeah, being less agreeable is considered a masculine trait and feature. And that's why, you know, men are just a little bit less agreeable. They're a little, in some ways, more stubborn. They're more set in their ways. You know, try getting a man like me to take directions, right? I know where I'm going. So it can be a challenge. And when you're looking to persuade, it's not just persuading for a job or negotiating, but it's also, of course, when you're in a debate, having an argument, and focusing on people, you know, focusing on the people can lead to more ad hominems, more, you know, ethos-based dialogue, where you're saying, well, you believe this because you. That's more ethos-based. That's more about that specific person, that's the specific ethic involved, and so on and so forth. Less substance. Substance would be more of a logos-based argument, a rational argument. And I call it waging war because, yeah, I mean, the female wage gap is there in part because of, you know, I think Jordan Peterson said there's about 16 or more different factors that go in to why women tend to make a little bit less money than men. But if you have any more information on that, please leave a comment below. I do seek subject matter experts, and I'm not one on this subject, but I did touch a little bit about how individuals, may they be male, female, non-binary, trans, however they might be, whatever gender or sex they may be, we all have a spectrum. We're all on a spectrum of sexuality and of masculine and feminine traits. So, you know, you can, again, it doesn't apply to everybody ever, but of course this is a general statement. It's hard for somebody that's used to taking a sort of follower role, a beta role, for example, or somebody that's sort of circling a leadership role. It's a little difficult to step into that leadership role if you haven't practiced. So like I say, practice makes perfect. Nothing is set in stone. If you want to change and you want to take on a leadership role, just practice. Put yourself in those shoes. Because as they say, fake it till you make it, right? Fake it till you make it. Okay. Onward to our next tweet. It's October, but it's another hot day here in Boston, Massachusetts. So one thing I've noticed going through my tweets from March 2019 is I started to indicate and put up a bunch of tweets talking about my positions on various wedge issues and important political and cultural issues that people tend to talk about. And so I will be doing a future video that just covers my positions on all these different topics. There's a number of tweets here, probably about 15 or 20 tweets that just cover my basic position, where it sits right now on a number of issues. Won't cover those today, but I figured I'd give you that little preview. We are going to talk about that in the future. And in the meantime, we'll talk about other things instead. Okay, so here's a tweet that asks a few questions. And if you have any answers for these questions, please do leave me a comment below. All right. So question number 1. How does a reliance on the internet for one's cultural consumption and contribution contribute to the rise or fall of postmodern ideologies? Our online personas begin one step detached from our true selves. And question number 2, how have our tribal tendencies evolved in the information age? These are good questions. I don't actually have the answers to them, but let's talk about them a little bit, and maybe you can help out by leaving a comment below with your thoughts on these questions. So question number 1, once again, how does a reliance on the internet for one's cultural consumption and contribution contribute to the rise and fall of postmodern ideologies? And then I say our online personas begin about one step detached from our true selves. So one thing about online personas is that we do have a number of individuals out there, and in fact, it's not just these people that are LARPing, that have a specific character they're playing online or a specific code that they operate by, but it really is everybody. We all act a little bit differently online. We present ourselves differently from the real world. So we're already taking a step away from our true selves. We're operating in this sort of post-modern realm. We are, doing things based on optics sometimes more than we should be. We're not operating always specifically. We might be doing trolling. We might be having fun. We might not be operating, and of course the veil of anonymity has added with the internet this world where people feel emboldened. They feel free to do and say things they normally wouldn't. So I ask about postmodern ideologies here, and of course postmodern ideologies, how to describe them in a nutshell. It's just a construct. Everything is just a construct, and here's a system that human beings have designed to help us better understand it, and here's an ideology. I might even call it a modern religion, modern religions for postmodern prophets. That's a tweet of mine you can check out for a list of those. But they include things like social justice, censorship, moral panic, global warming, institutions, outrage culture, celebrity, and so on and so forth. Essentially, these postmodern belief systems can be framed as modern religions. Even the devoutly secular can get on board, grab a little moral virtue, do a search for some universal truth, and, get where they're going, however they'd like to move forward in this world from an ethical standpoint and so forth. So we are always a little bit detached from our online personas. We're acting a little differently. We're acting cooler. We're acting meaner. We're acting, we're not presenting ourselves the way we would to our families or necessarily our friends in many cases. Again, can't speak for everybody, but that's my general observation. And so it's easy for postmodern ideologies to take hold because we are a little detached. We are looking to we are seeing this world where there's so many different viewpoints, and we don't know what's right and what's wrong. We don't know who to trust. We don't know which news to trust. The trust in the news, according to a lot of studies, and the public doesn't trust the news the way they used to. So it's a question: how does it contribute to the rise and fall? Like, people are looking for order in a chaotic world. They're looking for purpose. They're looking for things that bring some kind of direction, that help them control where things are going. And postmodern ideologies, modern religions, or even traditional religions, they can provide these answers. They can provide the answers to some of these questions. And if we're already a little bit detached from reality, well, applying a filter, applying a system, applying a postmodern construct becomes just a little bit easier, I suppose. And yeah. And of course, along with the ideologies, you get into this mentality of collectivism, this mentality of groupthink. And so when you talk about the next question here, we ask this question number 2. How have our tribal tendencies evolved in the information age? Well, now we have all kinds of different tribes going on. We have communities and forums. We have echo chambers here and there. We have all these different, we have political factions. We have, different communities for different hobbies. We have all this different stuff. We have a lot of crossover too. We have a lot of crossover. I've been discussing with my friends a little bit about how the right-wing individuals, the people, the Republicans, are enamored with left-wing Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things going on about tribalism. You have cults, essentially, the culture, cults of personality. You have people that follow a specific cause, that follow, for example, the modern religion that is global warming. They're engulfed in it, and they do not wish to cause any further climate catastrophe by talking to or giving any sort of platform to those that are, skeptical, climate skeptics, for example. So there's a lot of tribalism. We always, we always have this tendency to split up into groups. Every argument has two sides. Every debate, every question has a few different answers, a few different ways you can go. I always say the truth lies between. It's not on the left or the right when you're talking politically, even if that's a false dichotomy. It's always somewhere in between. I do have another video out there, The Truth Lies Between the Left and the Right. It has a nice big picture of Joe Rogan, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. So our tribal tendencies have evolved when we are becoming tribal based on the way information flows is a whole lot different. We have people that get into what Scott Adams calls a silo. That would be like an echo chamber. And we are being directed around by the algorithms, and we have people that are, they're following something for different reasons. They might be doing it to be with their people. Their friends might like it, or maybe they feel connected to that topic. There's so many things, so many reasons and ways. But tribalism, we're still in the jungle, folks. We're still in the jungle. We haven't evolved that much from our old school tribal tendencies. We still have our pattern recognition. We still have a tendency to take a team, to join a side. And with postmodernism, it requires you to kind of get on board and get into this mindset, to get inside of, like I say, like a modern religion. When you're talking about social justice, you require people to get into that mindset, to say, well, people should be judged by their immutable characteristics. They should be separated into groups: race, gender, sex, and then you can go into the mutables, mutable being things like religion or their occupation or whatever it might be, the hobbies that they do. You can group them up and say, well, all people in this group do this, and all people, and that's an entire mindset of collectivism, not individualism, where you look at people individually like we should, look at their merits, their flaws, their pros and cons, and look at their character. That's how we should be doing it. But of course, tribalism is, and promotes this idea, excuse me, that, they do this way, you do this that way, and I can't support that, or I can't support this, or I'm for this, or I'm for that. In the information age, I mean, it's the old ways of people having a wedge between each other. We're not all going to agree. But how do we get there in the information age? It has changed. It has changed. One part of it, of course, as many say, is social engineering through the algorithm, through editorial choices, and through just this general creation of narratives, creation of the macro simulation, as it were, whatever it might be, that the reality that the media projects, the narrative the media projects, and of course the range of acceptable dialogue they create, or they're trying to create. You want to make sure you have right think, right? Because people in this world, if you have a situation where if you have everybody saying, if there's a consensus about something, and you happen to be outside that window of acceptable dialogue that's continuously getting smaller, well, your views are extreme. They're extreme, and you can be seen as a bit of the outcast or the weirdo. And it can create some social pressure and social tension when people say, well, this person is a conspiracy theorist. They'll put you in a group. They'll put a label on you. And there's all these things that continue to happen to this day. And in fact, it's accelerated. It's accelerated because everything is instant. All your information, it's instant. You just pick up your phone, press a couple buttons, and you're instantly connected to whatever you want. And of course, people start to, given that time is the currency, time is money, we don't have much time, people tend to go with what's more comfortable, what's more pleasing. They don't have to worry about their cognitive walls being pushed up against. They can go with their confirmation bias. They don't want to feel the pain, the tension of cognitive dissonance that we all feel whenever we're encountering something that, calls into question our belief system. So I would love it if you guys, whoever's watching this video on YouTube or BitChute, would answer the questions below and give me your thoughts. What do you think? How does the internet, how has it changed the rise and fall of postmodern ideologies? Being a little bit disconnected from the topic, we're able to, whatever topic it might be, people talk about, for example, the border issue, the southern border of the United States. President Trump wants to build a wall, or they're building a wall. And people would say things to me like, when I was talking in the immigration debate, they'd say things like, oh, nation states are just a construct. Like they have this sort of disconnect. Like they're able to talk about it free flowing. It's great that it's, we can talk about things in a postmodern framing to kind of do a diagnostic. But when you get down to it, really you have this faith over reason, this belief system that is partially irrational, partially rational. But they'd say, oh, a nation state's just a construct, and welfare is just a construct. To have a successful welfare state, you need a strong border, of course. But they'd say sovereignty is just a construct. There's this disconnect. It's like if they had to deal with the reality of the situation directly, if they were at the border, if they were seeing these gangs, seeing the trafficking, seeing all this stuff happening, they wouldn't be able to get all postmodern and think about it like, oh, well, being an American citizen, being a citizen of Spain or wherever it might be, it's just a construct. Citizenship is a construct. Taxes are a construct. Walls are it's like it keeps on going and going, this disconnection. And of course, if you're LARPing, you're disconnecting your real personality from that character as well. But that's an extreme case. Really, it's more about in general, how we present ourselves, how we virtue signal, how we say that, like how we're feeling about these things that we have this detachment from. And postmodern ideology is all about detachment. It's all about being able to easily organize our society and our reality to fit these systems. And as I call them, modern religions, because they require faith over reason. And even the devoutly secular can believe in them. So that is that one. Please do leave me a comment below with your thoughts on that. So I have a couple of interesting, no pun intended, interesting tweets here, named tweets. And I'll start with this one called D-Person of Interesting. D-Person of Interesting. When was the last time you said something was interesting when it was actually interesting at the time? Perhaps the word's popular meaning drifts and ranges of apathy and disinterest. Is interesting just not that interesting? That's interesting. Gotta go. Okay? So as with my other tweet there, cultural capitalism, there is a second version of this tweet, and I will read that one now. This one is called Interesting Departure. When was the last time you used interesting while discussing something that was interesting? Interesting that the meaning of the word can range from anything to disinteresting. Is interesting just not that interesting? That's interesting. Gotta go. Yeah, so this kind of plays off the idea that if you're talking to somebody and they say, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting there. Interesting. Yeah, interesting. Are they really interested? Is it really interesting? It's more like they're not really interested, right? When was the last time you said something was interesting when it was actually interesting? It's a great question. I usually say interesting myself when a topic is, it has merit, it has value, but it's like you don't have the time or you don't have the interest at that time. It's interesting. You can get a little more thoughtful and maybe give your input on it or think about it or look into it, but it's you say interesting. And oftentimes, more often than not, it's not all that interesting. Perhaps the word's popular meaning drifts and ranges of apathy and disinterest. Yeah, you don't say interesting because something is interesting. And then you say, that's interesting. Gotta go. It's like it's a way to wind down a conversation as well, which really, implies that it's the topic wasn't interesting to begin with. So interesting can mean anything, or it can mean disinteresting, and anywhere in between those two. Is interesting just not that interesting? Yeah, it's more of a joke tweet than anything of substance, but I figured I'd throw that out there. Rather interesting, am I right? Well, onward and upward. All right, so let's do something a little more substantive and less interesting. So this is called Questions for Disciples of the Modern Religion Known as Censorship. Question A. If a given platform counters the inertia of speech destruction by catering to popular pariahs, how does that impact the market economy? Question 2, or question B, should depersoning extend to the right to prosper? And question C, how much control should the algorithm retain? Well, these are interesting questions. Once again, leave me a comment below with your thoughts and observations on these. How you believe they should be answered. Give me your subjective viewpoint and provide some objective pointers, however you'd like to do it. So the first question, if a given platform counters the inertia of speech destruction, well, that's strong, speech destruction. If a given platform counters that inertia, the destruction of speech, by catering to popular pariahs, how does that impact the market economy? Well, if you're on Gab, you know a little bit about that. I recently saw Alex Jones's profile there, and I'm like, whoa, Alex Jones is on Gab. And you should be too. Check out their Dissenter app, just www.dissenter.com. Lets you comment on any URL online. They also have their free speech web browser. Check it out. And Gab, of course, is an alternative, a free market alternative to Twitter. It is a social media platform that offers very similar format. And I am Real Jeff Tidwell over there. So if you cater to a popular pariah, so Alex Jones is a great case in point. Here's a popular pariah. Here's somebody, along with InfoWars, that was completely depersoned and deplatformed. Not every individual from InfoWars lost their account. Paul Joseph Watson is still on Twitter. He's still on Minds. He's still around. But really, it does impact the market economy because people, once a platform destroys speech, which is also known as censorship, okay, once they follow the prophets of the modern religion that is censorship, and they start to silence voices, and they start to remove content, they start to remove perspectives, certain topics become off limits, okay, they try to create an environment, an echo chamber where everybody can get on the same page, and that window, that Overton window of acceptable dialogue drops to a point where, if you get outside that window, you can't be on our platform. We'll call it things like the arbitrary definition, hate speech. We'll say it's hate speech, or we'll give another reason. We'll say the advertisers aren't happy. We'll say that there's hateful conduct. What is hateful conduct? Is critiquing somebody or disagreeing with somebody hateful conduct? But it does impact the market economy because people will need to go to other places. They'll need to use other services, other products, to get the information that you were providing in the first place. If you censor somebody, if you remove their voice, they'll have to go somewhere else. They'll have to go from Twitter to Gab. I say you should have an account on both places and certainly help promote the free market. But yeah, I'd say it certainly impacts it in other ways too, in many other ways. Forgive me for any failures of imagination during this video. I'm still warming up after a week off. So the next question here is, should depersoning extend to the right to prosper? So yeah, if somebody is a human being and they're living in a country, for example, that offers them the right to prosper, United States, you should have a right to prosper. You should have, I'm not sure if that's actually in the Constitution. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments section below. Send me a tweet. But should depersoning extend to the right to prosper? I think that that's going a little bit far. Now, depersoning isn't just deplatforming. Depersoning is when you essentially remove somebody from the greater internet, the greater society, the greater world. It's not just taking somebody's voice away. It's saying, well, you can't bank. You can't exist in the world. You can't have any hosting. There's no, just because my platform doesn't like you, depersoning involves a whole other slew of controls to get that person away and limit their right to prosper. They can't prosper because everybody's blackballed them. They've been blacklisted. So I don't think that depersoning should happen to begin with, but if it extends to the right to prosper, that really just destroys, that really does deperson It goes beyond speech destruction. It destroys a person. It's almost like, it's exiling. It's creating a pariah. It is anti-human to do that. It's not very conducive to the kind of civilization I think that we have intended these past few hundred years with the Founding Fathers and the Enlightenment and all this other stuff that's gone on. I don't think we want to be completely depersoning people. Although there are some cases where it might be more socially accepted, the consensus will decide. I would not want to be the one to choose for sure. And how much control should the algorithm retain? Questions for disciples of censorship. How much control should the algorithm retain? So the algorithm is, of course, designed by human beings, but ultimately it's used to direct blame. They say, well, it wasn't human decision that had this person deplatformed or censored, or they had their account suspended or banned for 24, 48 hours, a week, whatever it might be, 30 days. It was the algorithm. It's just all, it's like the postmodern ideology thing. We're get a little bit of separation there. We don't know what's going on with the algorithm. We designed it. But we don't know what's going on. It acts independently. It has its own agency. That's the algorithm. The algorithm controls everything. It controls what you see. It controls what I see. It controls what we hear. It controls a lot. It controls how we think. If we see the same messaging again and again, or we see a lack, a dearth, it can go either in a positive direction or a negative direction. Whatever information we get, that determines our decisions. Of course, some would say that if you're working within the realm of rational free will, your brain makes the decision and you rationalize it later. I will say something, but my brain kind of already knew what was coming. There was already this incentive structure built in, and I'm just, we're kind of along for the ride. Of course, I personally like to believe and refer to irrational free will. That's the human free will that we all enjoy. Where we make rational decisions and we make irrational decisions, and you never know just how rational your decision-making process is. But that's a little bit off topic. How much control should the algorithm retain? Well, it has a lot of control. I don't think it should have as much as it does. But again, someone asked me to what degree I think the algorithm should control things. I think that in my world, in my perfect world, my subjectively perfect world, since perfection is a fallacy, I would like the algorithm to maybe, you'd be able to direct it, to show you what you'd like to see. But right now, the algorithm is really operating on a number of us. And again, the algorithm changes depending on which platform you're on, which program you're using, which people, which company. There is no one algorithm, obviously. But I would say I don't think the algorithm should have high control to direct what the narrative is or what people are seeing and doing. I think there should be a little bit more ability for a person to curate, their own feed and their own information intake. If they're an intellectual and they're addicted to information, they want more knowledge, they should be the ones to determine how they get it. But of course, in this world we live in, where we have the powers that be, we have these immense post-governmental tech companies. Some call it social media, the fifth estate. We have all this stuff going on. It's really difficult. We're getting to a point in time where we are losing control of the process, and really the only ones that have that control, and even they don't quite know exactly what's going on, are these massive tech companies, these Facebooks, these Twitters, YouTube, Google, Amazon, Apple. They have their algorithm, and we've seen a little bit using the leaks from Project Veritas. We have seen a little bit of how social engineering takes place in the information age. But I like to give, as an individualist, and somebody that believes in individual agency over collective thought and hive mind thinking and groupthink, I like to give as much individual agency and control to the user as possible. So that's kind of where I fall on that. But yeah, these are some interesting questions for the disciples of the modern religion known as censorship. Okay. 2 more tweets for you today. So here is a tweet. It's a little heady. It's called Points. Points. All people default to a one-dimensional opinion in the end. A singular, malleable point on any given question. The more points we consume and validate, the stronger that singularity. This is a microcosm of the macrocosm that points us towards single-minded groupthink. Single-minded groupthink. Jeff, those contradictions are stacking up. I say if you want to confuse people and bend them to your whims, you want to stack contradictions and limit information. I learned that in sophistry school. It's another video on my channel, BitChute and YouTube. Definitely check that out if you want to know a little bit more about the modern religion that is institutions, academia, media, and state, and how people, the methods they use, the propaganda, the psychology behind the control. So let's break it down one sentence at a time, because this is a fun one. Well, one of the reasons I take time between the tweet and the video, why there's a 7-month gap, is I like to look at my content. I haven't actually seen this tweet or any of these tweets in those 7 months, and it's a good way for me to kind of walk through my own views, walk through my own opinion from 7 months ago, and determine just how much of it is I still hold and is still valid, and be able to explain what I've said in the past. So that's kind of part of the reasoning behind why I am going all the way back. And also, it gives me incentive and makes it more fun because I'm seeing things that surprise me that I almost don't remember writing sometimes. And then once I talk it through, I start to remember the thought process, and it gets there. So it's a challenge. And yes, if you're watching the video, you might see me rambling a little bit if I don't quite have it locked down to the level I required to write it in the first place, but we'll get there. So all people default to a one-dimensional opinion in the end, a singular malleable point on any given question. So we all do, and again, I don't think anybody here, I certainly don't, purport to be unbiased. I have positions, I have places where I say it's kind of a fool's errand to think in absolutes, but some people just end up getting to a position, and it's better to just have that confirmation and to settle in, and it can create, again, I work in a world of casual fatalism where some things can be changed and others are not malleable, and they are just set. But some things in this world, it's good to have something to lean on, and some people use traditional religion. They might look to God. They might look to Allah. They might be Buddhist. Or they might have modern religion. They might say the way to universal truth and moral virtue is just to trust the experts. That would be believing in the modern religion of institutions. Trust the experts. Now the experts, I do say seek subject matter experts, but you don't want to get too bogged down in putting faith over reason, looking at ethos over logos. That's not what I'm advocating for here. But we do tend to come down to a one-dimensional opinion, which means it's either A or B. You either want this or you don't want this. You agree or you don't agree. And that tends to be for every single topic. Every single point of every single place, you have an A-B test. You have an AB. You have an AB, a fork in the road at the end of the day. We're not talking on a macro level. We're talking on a micro level. You end up having that 0-1 binary choice. Either you want this one or that one. And you might have a number of options to choose from. Like it might not be dualistic or binary in the end. But ultimately it comes down to questions like this. It comes down to that single point and go, okay, well, here's where I'm not movable and here's where I'm movable. And this is a place where you develop a relatively or temporarily absolute position. So, all people, that means all 7+ billion of us, with all of our 7+ billion perspectives, we all default to a one-dimensional opinion, a singular, malleable point. It's malleable, meaning it can change on any given question. The more points we consume and validate, the stronger that singularity. So again, that's just referring to confirmation bias. The more that we add up points, the more points we have. We start with an assumption, a presumption, and the more we take in, the more we consume, that makes that stronger. The more points we consume and validate. So we validate them, we apply them, and we say, well, okay, this goes along with my existing thought process. We keep on making it stronger and stronger and stronger. The more we hear that same message, either from ourselves or from somebody else, and the more we put that through our cognitive pathways, our brain pathways, the more it becomes real, the more it becomes solid and becomes our opinion, our position. Okay, you might be on the fence. I'm on the fence about a number of issues, but ultimately, it's good to have a place to rest. Okay, I say in the context of the echo chambers, I say it's not good to live in an echo chamber. It's nice to vacation there, where somebody is applying the same opinion again and again and again, and reinforcing your viewpoint by hitting that again and again, validating your existing assumption. But it's also good to have a place to debate, a place to where people can push up against your confirmation bias. They can test and challenge your cognitive dissonance and really exercise your intellectual muscles. That's a good thing to have. I say don't stay in an echo chamber too much. Take in information from people you disagree with. Like, have people you disagree with your friends. Don't get mad when they disagree with you. We're all different. We all have our own values. We all have our own, our own window on reality. So that it's natural for us to have disagreements, and they may be rational, irrational. I might be wrong. I might be right. You might be wrong. You might be right. We might all be wrong. Who knows? We might all be right. There's so many different ways it can go. But the point is that, the more that we consume and validate on that line, the more that we continue, the stronger that singularity gets. And this is a microcosm of the macrocosm that points us towards single-minded groupthink. So, yeah, ultimately it can go for a larger idea, an ideology, if it were. It can go for, if you keep on repeating the same ideological messaging over and over again, people will just go, well, of course that's real. Of course that's true. Of course, the modern religion of social justice is the only way to look at the difference between people. There are no other factors, because I've heard that messaging so many times, sometimes consciously, subconsciously, unconsciously, subliminally. You hear it again in the movies, you read it in books, you get it in your classroom, you get it on your social media. That message comes and comes and comes and comes. And ultimately, people start to fall into a tribe, a camp. And it becomes, people look at what others are doing, and it continues to validate what we're thinking. And if everybody's saying, well, you're doing the right thing, if someone's telling you you're doing the right thing, you're on the right path, I agree with you, the experts agree with you, all these people we trust and respect agree with you, yeah, you can fall into single-minded groupthink. A friend of mine was talking a little bit about Sam Harris recently, and I respect Sam a lot. I want to put a preface here that I respect Sam a lot. I like you, Sam Harris. But some have talked about how in the world of academia, that modern religion of institutions and the branch known as academia, a lot of times the same kind of opinions are repeated and repeated and repeated. There becomes a bit of a consensus in academic circles that may not match what people are doing on the outside, what they might be doing in a different frame of mind, a different frame of reference. When you're, studying, when you're in the classroom, this environment, our environment, it influences, it directs how we perceive the world. Getting into a specific mindset, getting into different pathways towards whatever goal it might be, but getting into specific kinds of systems to, interpret reality. When you get into those systems, it's, again, muscle memory, but it's your cognitive muscles that get worked. It's your confirmation bias, it's your cognitive dissonance muscles that get worked, and you're able to go through and you're able to determine, like, you look at empirical evidence here and you make a rationalization there, and there's some irrational and some rational, and you're going all the way through. But ultimately, if people are telling you, well, most people agree, 97% of people agree, the experts agree, we all agree, yeah, it validates, and allows you to rest your mind. It allows you to rest your mind, and you just go along with the crowd. Now, this is all, I'm not telling you to do this. I'm saying this is a likelihood. We don't want to be working our brains overtime all the time. We have a lot of things to do. We have work, we have family, we have friends. We have to keep up with Netflix, whatever it might be. People sometimes just take their positions and their opinions based on what the group is doing. Oh, this is the recommended way to do it. This is the prescribed way. This is the way that a source that I trust says that I should do it. And I can't really fault anybody for that. But it's good to deconstruct it and talk about it. How we continually consume these points. We validate and make our confirmation stronger. And it's, we can change that point. We can be malleable. We can look at new information. This is the real intellectual angle. We can look at new information and apply it. And if it calls into question our pre-existing assumption, our presumption, we can adapt. We, of course, can adapt and change our position at will. And again, though, we do have a propensity, many of us, again, I'm not speaking for everybody, but just generally speaking, we do have a propensity to fall on one position and kind of at least give a little bit of an investment, in that position. Like, you can't just be like flip-flopping back and forth, right? You have to settle into something eventually, and then you start to rationalize why you continue to believe that. You look at those points, and if they don't contradict, if they're not getting pushed away, and they conform, yeah. I mean, that's confirmation bias in a nutshell. And cognitive dissonance, of course, is when you look at something and you sort of reject the reality of the situation for one reason or another. You look at something that contradicts your pre-existing assumption, and you just push it away without much thought. Of course, there are, I've done a number of videos on cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias. I recently did one, can't remember the name of it, but it was confirmation bias, cognitive dissonance, and groupthink. And that's on my BitChute channel. So one more tweet for you today. And maybe this one will be a little less rambly. More questions. Do you remember Google's The Good Censor? Google the good censor. I went through my people that won't be the president. Peter Buttigieg. At least not in 2020. He's too young. Too young. Marianne Williamson. Oh, I won't continue. You can always look that up on my Twitter, at RealJeffTidwell. Okay, so I'll finish with this one here. I like this topic quite a bit, and I like this band as well. This is influenced by Radiohead, and this is a named tweet. It's called OK Computer. OK, comma, computer. Human nature doesn't iterate with the advancement of technology. The organic hardware in our head retains the legacy firmware of eons past, while algorithms have already surpassed our ability to signal en masse. But personally, there's nothing like the real thing. And it's true, human nature does not iterate with the advancement of technology. We're still in the jungle on this planet, folks. We are still in the jungle. People think that because we have higher definition TVs and faster processors and we're carrying around a supercomputer in the palm of our hand and everybody on the street has one, virtually. Even the homeless people are walking around with at least an iPhone 5 or 6 and they're on plans. There's all these kind of, not obviously not in every situation, but there's certainly people. Technology is everywhere. It's all around us. And yet, we have barely evolved. We haven't changed that much over the past 500 years, 1,000 years, 2,000, and even much further back. Cognitively, we haven't changed that much. It doesn't iterate. We still have the same, emotions. We still have anger and fear. We still have our, the fact that we are irrational beings. It goes on and on. So technology has brought us to this place where everything is, everything is better understood. We have AI, we have machine learning, we have everything organized, and everything is designed, and everything is, computer systems, if they were to ever go down, society would temporarily collapse for a day. We are very reliant on technology. But in reality, human nature has not changed. Technology has come leaps and bounds, obviously, even in the past 40 years, 50 years, since the invention of the atomic bomb, since Einstein's time. Things have gone really, really far, but people haven't changed. We're the same. We're mostly the same. There's some slight differences, and certain groups might have different characteristics. Things might have trended a certain way. When you remove the need for survivalism, when you remove the threats from the environment, there are certain areas, people that are better off, the first world people, they might be in a different place in terms of, cognitively, they might have different pressures. The evolutionary pressures aren't there because it's like some say we have reached an age of sexual selection. Natural selection, Darwin, natural selection is over and now we're in an age of sexual selection because the evolutionary pressures aren't there. We're just, we have already, people that are, of course, this is a very privileged way to look at it because in the first world countries and areas, we don't worry about these things. Obviously, when you're in a third world country or in a place that has less money, you're not able to have the luxury to think about the Renaissance, to think about, all these different things, art as much. You're worrying about just getting by, just surviving. And so Yeah, technology has made survival much easier. It's simplified our lives. It's also complicated them quite a bit. It hasn't really simplified them to the degree that it's complicated them, but it has, of course, relieved us of certain things that we had to worry about before. It's made our lives easier. It's simplified the overall course because computers handle this. They handle scheduling. We don't have to think as hard. We don't have to work overtime in our heads to get things done. Computers, you set it, you forget it. So technology is huge. We have advanced so far that it's insane. The organic hardware, though, the organic hardware in our heads, the OK computer, it retains the legacy firmware of eons past. Eons have passed. We have barely changed. Our tools have changed. We have barely changed. And then I say algorithms have already surpassed our ability to signal. So we have systems at play here. We have all these different programs and things out there that allow algorithms to spread information. People don't even have to speak. Things are automated. They're automated. There's been AI out there. There's algorithms. There's people have automated all these systems that we used to need to perform organically, to process organically. And we used to have pen and paper, and now everything is just, well, you have email lists and you have social media and things, just people put in information, but ultimately you get all this content sent straight to your phone and everything is delivered. And algorithms have surpassed our ability to signal to large groups. Everything has been turned into an automated process. You're able to press a button and send a message to 1,000 people, 100,000, a million people. You press a button, you send it to hundreds of millions of people. It's all become easier, and the algorithms, of course, are programmed and designed to send to certain people at certain times. And of course, that is a problem in itself with the lack of transparency we see on social media. So I am glad that Mark Zuckerberg is talking to, the U.S. government and other organizations and trying to, whether it's lip service or if it's just a narrative or if it's true or not, at least we're looking and seeing that they understand the importance, the fact that these social media companies, these large platforms, or are they publisher a platform? I talk about that in a number of my videos as well. You can watch some of those talking about the difference between the publisher and platform. Either way, they're a post-governmental influence. They have more power and influence and control over the narrative than most of the governments in the world. So they can't, when you're looking at freedom of speech, this is kind of a side point, but when you're looking at freedom of speech, people, focus just on the strict definition saying if the government doesn't get in the way of speech. If the government's not getting in the way, it's a tech company. Free market, private company can do what want. And I say, well, no. Maybe they can't do what they want. Maybe they should have the freedom. But what is the cost of all this? What are we losing in the process? How much power do we want to actually give these companies? They control so much information flow. We get all of our opinions from the media. And by media, I mean everything. Not just social media, not just TV, not just books or magazines or video games or anything else, music. We don't get our information, we get it from everywhere. And if these companies determine how and when we see what's going on, well, yeah, they have a lot of power and they should be held accountable. They should be held to a transparent standard where we can see what's going on. Now, that's my ideal. I know it's not as realistic, it's not as pragmatic as it could be. But, you got to try, you got to push, you got to make the big ask. So, the organic hardware in our heads retains the legacy firmware of eons past. We haven't changed. It's technology that's changed around us, obviously informed by our decisions because we design it, while algorithms have already surpassed our ability to signal en masse. But personally, there's nothing like the real thing. I like that. At the end of the day, there's no replacing the truth, the real human, the irrational beings we are. There's no replacing human personality with a machine. There just isn't, in my book. I mean, people might say, well, eventually machines will learn and algorithms will get really good and AI will get better and you'll be able to look at art and you won't know if a machine designed it or a human. And I can level with that. I can agree with that. Call me agreeable. Say it's a feminine characteristic. That's totally fine, because I do have feminine characteristics and masculine ones. But at the end of the day, it's the real human imperfections that draw us back in, that bring us that interest. You know, we can tell. I can tell the difference. Or I like to believe I can, between something that the computer says. I'd rather have that human touch. It's the different desires contained within. The different motivations that a human has that a machine, even if you coded it, even if a human designed it, couldn't fully comprehend. But then again, who knows? Maybe we will pass through the uncanny valley, get through there, and I will meet a computer that passes the Turing test, and I'll go, okay, maybe humans aren't so unique and organic isn't the way. I could always change my opinion, but I wouldn't count on it. So, that's the end of the video for today. Thank you for watching, and I do appreciate your time and your patience. Hope you hit the two times speed button if it was a little bit slow for you. And of course, if you enjoyed the content, please do hit the like and subscribe button. If you didn't enjoy the content, you found my rambling nature a little bit too much for you today, hit the downvote button. That'll help me with the algorithm. Of course, if you really enjoy the content, hit the little bell below. If you're not watching this video on YouTube, you're watching it on BitChute, please subscribe to me there. I love supporting the alt tech platforms. And of course, I can be found on Twitter at RealJeffTidwell. I'm also on Gab, Minds, Telegram, Parler, and Instagram. And as I always say, everything I said today might be wrong. Or everything I said today might be right. Or perhaps it's somewhere in between. Some of what I said might be wrong, and some of what I said might be right. You let me know in the comments section below. Thank you again for watching, and I hope you all have an excellent night.